David settled back in his great gold-plated throne. He sipped fine wine from a gold-plated goblet. He breathed in the sweet smell of the cedar with which his new palace was furnished throughout. Oh, he'd come a long way since his days as a shepherd in the field, sleeping under the stars. He was finally settled in his house. The Lord has given me rest from all my enemies around me, mused David. And in this new resting position, he was seeing things in a new light. It now seemed to him that his thought processes had always been clouded with the urgency of conflict and political intrigue. I'm living in a cedar house, he said to himself, and then subsequently to his friend, Nathan the prophet. I've arrived. I've settled in. I have succeeded in climbing the royal ladder. So why should the presence of the Lord be huddled in a tent while I, a mere mortal, luxuriate in the aromatic house of kings? I've proved my mettle as a warrior, but the Lord has proven himself as a God of power, a God capable of delivering me out of every trouble. It's time that God joined me in a more upscale way of life. Well, if you're a religious professional and a member of the royal family offers to fund a new building project, you usually don't say no. So Nathan was enthusiastic, and they agreed that they would start the building process for a house of God. But then Nathan didn't get much sleep last night. So this morning, he's back at the palace for a breakfast meeting, and he's feeling rather uncomfortable. The thing is, he says, Your Majesty, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is that God doesn't want a house. Nathan gulped. God says, are you the one to build me a house to live in? Did I ever speak a word with any of the tribal leaders of Israel saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar? David is puzzled. So, God likes being in a tent? God likes camping? Nathan, no one likes camping. Well, Nathan thought he might as well go the whole way since he's got this far. He takes a deep breath. Well, Your Majesty, God likes being mobile, I think. He's that kind of God. You may be ready to settle down, but God isn't. He's glad you're at rest. He really is. It's him who's given you rest. But he's a God who disturbs the comfortable as well as comforting the disturbed. And also, he does like to be the one taking the initiative. He likes to be the subject of all the sentences. And here's the good news. Your Majesty, God doesn't want you to build him a house. He wants to build a house for you. Oh, I know what you're going to say, sir. You've got a house. But I think God is being metaphorical for you, you being a poet and everything. I think God is using house to mean dynasty. God says, I don't want you to get fixated on buildings, David. I will build the house of David, a family line that will rule on your throne forever. From your house will come a son of David who will establish peace in all the world. So it all turned out all right in the end. although Nathan must have been quite fearful delivering the message. David didn't build God a physical house. God did build David a spiritual house. And the metaphors stay live. God often seems to say things like, I will build my church, and I am building a temple of praise, and rebuild my church which is in ruins. But I think we should assume God isn't mainly speaking about walls and roofs and flying buttresses and flower arranging rooms and mixing desks. God is mostly speaking about a people whom God loves. Buildings can be wholly just and good, but if God had an inspirational calendar on his fridge, you can bet that the pictures on it aren't of basilicas and mega churches, but a people on his heart. Buildings can become idols when we spend more time and money on them than we do on justice and mercy and mission and the common good. Or when we're more attached to our particular parish church building than we are to our brothers and sisters in God's family. Many of us discovered this in COVID, didn't we? I know people who used to refuse to come to any church but their own when there were joint services or whatever. And then COVID came along and they found that, surprise, God was there in their homes the whole time. And now they've started finding God all over the place, including in places with pews and organs, even though they prefer chairs and music groups, and places with chairs and music groups, even though they prefer pews and organs. It isn't that there are no thin places, no sacred places where God is close. No, it's almost the opposite. There are no fat places where God cannot be found. He is in ancient chapels, but he's also in tents and on battlefields and in your kitchen. Friends organizations do a brilliant job of getting people who don't necessarily share Christian faith to value church buildings more and good on them. But today I just want to suggest that alongside a ministry of helping people value church buildings more, we do sometimes need to help God's people value physical buildings a little bit less and value the spiritual house, the family of God, a bit more. I often wonder whether our PCC or our diocesan budgets give any clues about what we value most. Because you and I, united with Jesus, the Son of David, are part of this house, this royal family, this spiritual building not made with hands. God is unpredictably mobile, but he's predictably loving, whoever you are, wherever you are. God makes us lie down in green pastures. He restores our soul, as David said in his most famous poem. God doesn't want us to build a banqueting hall and invite him as our guest. No, he wants us to be his guest in his house. He prepares a table for us in the presence of those who trouble us. In ancient culture, when someone was a guest, you would fill their cup as a sign that they were welcome. God doesn't just promise to fill our cups. He promises to pour such a torrent of good things into them that our cups overflow and run over.